Halo sahabat Katadata, senang sekali saya Sabrina Anggraini menemani Anda semua dalam diskusi Expert Talk yang diselenggarakan oleh Katadata Indonesia bekerja sama dengan Massachusetts Institute of Technology Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, Boston, Amerika Serikat. Saya tidak sendiri nih, karena ada Marina yang saat ini menjadi Project Manager MIT RIP yang akan menjadi co-moderator sesi kali ini.
Terima kasih Sabrina. Sebagai bagian dari jaringan Global MIT, Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program berkomitmen untuk memfasilitasi transfer teknologi dan pengetahuan dari Massachusetts Institute of Technology atau MIT ke Indonesia. Tujuan akhir dari program ini adalah berkontribusi pada pertumbuhan ekonomi Indonesia melalui inovasi deep tech.
Tema kita pada episode kedua adalah pentingnya anggaran riset untuk inovasi deep tech. Akan ada dua narasumber yang akan berbagi pandangan mereka tentang topik kali ini, yaitu Mr. Scott Stern, seorang Kaufman Prize Medal Awardee for Distinguished Research in Entrepreneurship, dan PLT Dirjen Pendidikan Tinggi Kementerian Pendidikan, Kebudayaan, Riset, dan Teknologi, Profesor Pak Nizam. Selamat malam, Pak.
Selamat malam. Good morning there in MIT Boston.
Good morning from MIT Boston.
Hi.
Good morning, everybody.
As an MIT alumni, I am so excited to be able to talk about this important topic, moreover discussing it more in depth about Indonesia's status for that. Okay, so for this conversation, I will carry it in English and so we can have a great discussion together. First, I would like to ask Pak Nizam, and this question is about the research budget in Indonesia. Pak Nizam, I wanted to ask because I'm curious about the research budget in Indonesia. What is the current size of the research budget in Indonesia? Because as we know, the research budget also illustrates how the country is also prioritizing innovation in the country.
Yes, thank you very much, Sabrina. Good morning, Marina and Scott, and colleagues from Katadata. The Indonesian research budget is still relatively low compared to the GDP. Still a bit less than 1% of the GDP. It's much less than what we all expected to fund research and development. If I can spread that budget, mostly goes to university. The budget was when I was formerly in the Director General of Higher Education Research and Technology, was around 2 trillion rupiah. So that is what to translate in US dollars. But yeah, so that is about below 1% of the national GDP. And another big chunk for research funding is go to BRIN, the National Research Institute agencies. That is apart from the private sector funding. But the data that I can gather, private sector funding is just about 1/3 of government funding, which is much less than what we expected actually.
Can I cut here?
Yeah,
Scott, how much is the percentage of the GDP for research in the US?
Within the United States and many OECD countries, the aggregate R&D budget tends to be somewhere between 3 and 3.5% of GDP. But I think one of the striking features of, for example, the US R&D budget is that there is a very strong support from the private sector, often with public policy encouraging that. R&D tax credits, various ways to encourage innovation, and rules that encourage venture capital, which we know is a particularly impactful form of bringing innovation from idea to impact through companies and new technology.
That's very interesting because we believe that in order for a country to progress forward, of course, they need to take an in-depth look about the future innovation that could be a potential for more challenges in the future. So for the next question, Pak Nizam, I would like to ask about the challenges in directing the research budget in Indonesia. My question is, will there be challenges in directing the research budget in Indonesia specifically towards the deep tech innovation?
Yes, well, if you ask a professor from university what research he or she would like to do, he or she will just tell you that he is having their dreams what science development is. And that oftentimes not relates directly to the need of the industry, not directly related to the need of the economic growth, not directly related to the real challenge what the common people facing. So to align that research spirit from academia to link closer to industries is a big challenge for us in Indonesia. Because unlike in the developed countries where industry already mature and they already understand the importance of research and development, the importance of innovation in driving the growth of the industry, this is not the case yet in Indonesia. First, the industry in Indonesia is still relatively small in terms of size, and also many of the companies are multinational. So the research they do is always conducted in the principal countries rather than in Indonesia. So the need from industry to go to university to ask for research is not yet there. So that is a big challenge. So in one hand, we need to, well, encourage university to do translational research that address the need of industries. In the other hand, we also need to bring the industries to come to university that they need university to do research and development. So we need to bring the two together to the same table. So that is what is the big challenge, and what we try to do in the past, at least in the past 4 years.
That's very interesting. So, Professor Scott, if I may ask, does that happen that way in the US as well? Does the growth of deep tech actually needs to wait for like more industry involvement and also like more government budget?
So the challenge that Professor Nizam is correctly pointing out is that on the one hand, researchers, if you put too much structure on them, they'll just focus on very, very narrow projects. And so we love the concept, both in the United States and I think all over the world, of academic freedom, of letting our university researchers figure out projects that they care about, that they have a unique insight into, and of course, as part of a global scientific collaboration and network. At the same time, I think as Professor Nizam exactly points out, the most impactful type of research is when we see what sometimes is called use-inspired basic research, when we are really motivated by problems of industry, of hard problems that would allow us to create new value-adding activities for the economy, particularly in science and engineering. And so in the United States, and I think in many other advanced economies around the world, there's been a real focus on helping to encourage researchers to choose projects that all lead into the needs of industry, while also respecting the fact that ultimately they get to choose which projects to work on. That's a kind of delicate balance. The fact that there are many universities in the United States and there's a reasonable amount of research funding helps with that, but it's not the only part of it. So the first part is, I think that Professor Nizam is exactly correct in sort of saying that we need a system where on the one hand we encourage academic freedom, but on the other hand we encourage and promote working with industry, working on problems that are really going to be critical breakthroughs. Very often, so at MIT, our motto is mens a manus, mind meets hand. And the idea there is that we love doing rigorous things with our mind, but we also like applying those things to the real world. We bring ideas to impact. And that's very much in the DNA of a place like MIT and some of other America's great research universities. The consequence of that is, okay, what do you do there? And one way of doing that is that university researchers are often very good at helping to identify solutions to problems once they understand what those relevant problems for industry are. And so sometimes that requires or is helped by encouraging researchers to actually look at what the problems of industry are to understand their needs, to start training their students towards those needs. And very often, some of the most important breakthroughs in science, in technology, come from those very kind of problem-centric or solution-centric, approaches to sort of thinking about research in science and engineering.
It's so interesting to think about what we can do to close the gap between what the researchers are solving versus what the industry or the society is needing. So I think there are a lot of efforts that we can make in order to close the gap. And I want to talk about one topic that we often talk nowadays is the STP or the science technoparks. I would like to ask, what is STP or science technoparks, and what is the main mission of an STP in society?
Yeah, I think we are very much inspired by what happened in the United States, like with the Science Triangle in North Carolina in 1951, Stanford Science Park in 1957, if I'm not mistaken. Also Silicon Valley, the results from that. So concentrating between academia, big campuses, and industry in the same spot will spark that marriage between industries and university. Because what I found difficult is when academia speak to industrialists, they have different language. They speak different language, so it's often lost in translations. But by coming together through that catalyst, what we now call it as science technopark, the two meet together in a coffee table and discuss things, translating the problems, making the problems understood by the academia, and while at the same time academia can speak their invention, their new ideas, their thought, that can then be translated into business, into new economy, into new products. So that sort of things need a catalyst, needs a difficult coffee table to speak and discuss together and to talk together. So that is what the science technopark, in my understanding. And that is what we try to do. In our campuses, we start to develop science technopark as meeting points between industries and academia to discuss together, vision together what the future is in electric vehicle, for instance. What is the future in battery, renewable energy, biotechnology, whatever the university's Professor Eyes will spark, and what industries really need in assuring their future. So that is what the science technopark we dream of.
Wow, I really agree because the best ideas and collaboration starts from very casual conversations. And I feel that is a very good facility that can be used by the people, the citizens here, to meet each other and spark more innovation. Marina, do you have any thoughts?
That's very interesting, Professor. So like the Science Technoparks is one of the program from the government of Indonesia. It's sort of like trying to bring together the industry and the university that we were just talking about. Did you also see that that was like how places like Kendall Square or Silicon Valley started in the US?
So first, let me congratulate Professor Nizam and the government for promoting the notion of science and technology parks. When done well, they can be a tremendous catalyst to really building an innovation ecosystem, an innovation-driven entrepreneurial ecosystem that really works to bring ideas to impact in all economies around the world. Of course, right, universities sometimes are just ivory towers. They sit, the university researchers, the faculty do research, maybe they publish it in a very good journal or they go to an international conference, but they don't really connect to the needs of the local, and it doesn't really affect the local environment. And one of the kind of key hypotheses behind a science and technology park is the notion that by encouraging exactly the kind of coffee table conversations that Professor Nizam talked about, that you can actually both engage researchers to focus more on problems of interest, and then also for industry to learn about that global scientific and technological frontier. Let me add just two small things to that. The first is that sometimes, and we've had teams within the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program that have worked where their only focus of the program is how to make their science and technology park actually work better. Because what sometimes happens is a bunch of companies go into the park, they all have a nice sign outside that says what their company is, but the companies don't collaborate. They don't really interact with the university. And institutions, and here in Cambridge, we have, for example, the CIC, the Cambridge Innovation Center, where lots of companies are in the same building, very, very fluid, lots of coffee available, even maybe some more active activities for the evening. And that allows for a really impactful way for those ideas to come together. I went to, I got my PhD at Stanford University, right in Silicon Valley. This was a long time ago. And one of the things you see is that both Silicon Valley, one of the key features of Silicon Valley, of Kendall Square, of the Triangle Park down in North Carolina, is that people are willing to talk to each other. People are willing to talk to each other about their problems, about what are the important priorities, and there are ways of using those informal discussions and even orchestrating opportunities for those informal discussions so that you can really go from idea to impact on a regular basis. The only other thing I'd add, so one is that it's a great idea to have a science and technology park. You want to build it exactly around those coffee table conversations and build in sort of a social space. There's some very nice work that shows that, I'm trying to remember the exact statistic here, but essentially every time you add a cafe or one more kind of what they call a third place, a place that's not your office, not my office, but is a place we can meet, that encourages more activity, both by the industry in research as well as by academia to do that use-inspired research.
That makes me very interested to ask to Professor Nizam, can STP be merged with SEZ or Special Economic Zone in Indonesia? Because I think that's highly relevant.
Yes, exactly, Sabrina. So currently, there are many initiatives from the government, but still somewhat sector-based, not in a more comprehensive and link between those initiatives. Like
Compartmentalized.
Yes, compartmentalized, exactly, Mbak Marina. Yeah, so how to link between those STP initiatives and the special economic zones that government created is something that we need to preach the two. Because one of the problems is oftentimes special economic zones is developed not close to academic institutions to open up new opportunities, and mostly the special economic zones is more on creating jobs, factories, industries, which is not heavy in deep tech. So we need to shift that paradigm. We have to link between the deep tech that usually come from academia and research institutions and the special economic zone development. Nowadays, because the internet connections is relatively very cheap and very easy, very comfortable. Like now we can discuss with Scott from Boston. So place actually doesn't matter. With fourth industrial revolutions, that means we can distribute between the brain resources, manufacturing, industries, workers can meet in virtual world. I mean, so it is not necessarily that the special economic zone should be in the same place as the science technopark, but the link means they're connected, really connected. not just connected. It is connected by phone, connected by internet. No, but connected in terms of programs, in terms of progress, in terms of agenda, in terms of the need of the economic zones development, and what university can do. So that is something that I think we have to move toward, because again, currently the special economic zone usually develop in related to job creations, and usually that goes into places that is less developed, not in big cities, not close to academic institutions. So rather than forcing them to be in the same place, what is needed is to make that virtual space which they can connect in terms of programs, in terms of the needs, in terms of problems, in terms of solutions.
Do you think that STPs in emerging markets? Oh, Scott, do you want to add first? Okay.
Yeah, and I want to add one more thing. Because from the STP, what they expect is one of the goal is also to create spin-off, spin-out from this STP. So if STP is related or connected into the special economic zones, usually addressing a certain industry, for instance, in nickel, steel industries, in automotive industries. So if this STP connected into that special economic zone, then the spin-off, spin-out from university can then go to fit this special economic zone development. So one of the goal of the STP is to create a startup, spin-off, spin-out from the STP, which then can go into that industry, which is not necessarily in the same location.
Oh, I see.
And we have tried that. We have tried that with some success.
Oh, I see. Do you think that STPs in emerging markets can shift their focus more on deep tech? And what are the challenges that they might face, including in terms of public contracts?
Yeah, indeed. So that is what we try to push this STP to go into deep tech. Because now everyone, when they talk about startup, mostly are digital marketplace. So not creating products that is heavy in invention and innovations, the deep tech base. So that is something that we really encourage university to do by pushing resources or putting resources with the specific goals, whether that is on renewable energy, on health, on blue economy, the oceans. 75% of Indonesia is ocean.
Yes, true.
So that is a lot of resources that we can tap, but we need to add innovations, deep tech into that, in sea farming, in minerals, mining in deep sea, deep oceans, and renewable energy from the ocean. So many things.
Scott, do you have any idea how to make the merging between SEZ and STP in Indonesia more smoothly?
So at the heart of the Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program is the role of stakeholders in building our innovation-driven entrepreneurial ecosystems. And so part of that is understanding that, as Professor Nizam already described, that there's a gap between industry, particularly something like the companies and the jobs in the special economic zone, and the research in the science and technology park. And those might be in different places and also have different cultures and different people. And so what we try to do within REIT, what we've tried to do, and I think that the Indonesian team is moving very much forward on, is trying to figure out how to create trust between those stakeholders, connections between those stakeholders, purposive ways of connecting the dots so that it's not just good research in the science and technology park and good economics in the special economic zone, but that there's connectivity and flow from one to the other. So that's number one. And one of the key pieces of that is the role of clusters. So special economic zones are often organized around a particular industry or area, very often, kind of, right, there's going to be factories or so on and so associated with that. And one of the things that we see is that kind of organizing those clusters and creating a more innovation orientation to the cluster. So taking maybe an area that had traditionally been a area of primary mineral extraction, but then you're just exporting very raw material abroad, figuring out and having people within the science and engineering and researchers think about how to create extra added value. What role can Indonesia play to kind of go up the ladder of development, to look at each stage, and how can that be infused into the work of the special economic zones? That requires both the researchers to be aware of those problems, like we talked about before, the industry to be receptive to new solutions, and also for there to be trust and connection between the research community, the innovators and entrepreneurs, and industry. And that's, I think, something where government and universities can play a key role in facilitating those connections and providing encouragement to making the connecting areas that had previously been separate.
Does that happen through the government in the case of Silicon Valley or Kendall Square? Did the government actually facilitate that?
So I think that government can play, I would say that the government didn't do it, but the government can be an important facilitator. The government can encourage, can convene. It can create bridging programs and can provide funding that can allow the work of academia to be translated. So, for example, in the United States, we spend a tremendous amount of money on basic research through the National Science Foundation and other agencies. In the last few years, we are going to spend also money on not so much more research, but on institutions that can make sure and amplify the impact of that research on industry. So within the United States, there is something called the NSF, and the National Science Foundation Engines Program, another program called Tech Hubs, both of which sort of grapple with or try to facilitate that process of bringing work in academia, basic research, funded research, and the needs of industry closer together. And within REAP, one of the things we've really tried to emphasize is that that's not just a policy or a program, but it's about the building of stakeholder engagement within each of those areas. No one's really in charge of innovation or entrepreneurship. Even when Professor Nizam was in his prior role, he wasn't in charge. He could facilitate that from government. But ultimately, the innovating and the entrepreneurial, right, that work is the part of individuals who are building up their technology, who are building their companies, who are building their workforce. And so the government can play a role in helping that process along. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Great.
This is a very insightful discussion, and I think that was my last question for today's talk. I wish we could talk more because
I want to add some points. One thing, usually we just talk about downstreaming research, bringing research into industries, bringing research into product, into market. But for that to happen continuously, we need upstreaming problems to bring problems from industries to the university, to make the university understand what are the challenges in industries. So upstreaming is needed in order for us to be able to downstream research. Otherwise, it will not move. It will just not flowing. So we need upstreaming and also downstreaming.
So I just wanted to echo that insight. We have a wonderful colleague here at MIT, Vladimir Bulovich, who's a very distinguished material scientist, nanotechnology. And as he says about his students, we're privileged to have extraordinary students at MIT, just such as Sabrina, right? And Vlad often mentions the idea that once his students know what problems to work on, they can achieve miracles. But very often, they don't know what problems to work on. And engagement in the critical problems that an industry faces very often raise the most profound foundational problems for science. Right? That's the notion of Pasteur, right? One of the great scientists of all time, invented the germ theory of disease, discovered the germ theory of disease. He discovered that not because he was sitting in an ivory tower, because he was working on extremely applied problems in the dairy industry and in the wine industry, working with the local industry in France. We were very inspired by that model here at MIT. I think that's the kind of work that Professor Nizam is talking about. And I think that that's a direction where universities in the United States are going around the developed world. And I think that it's a very firm basis upon which to move forward the Indonesian university system and its broader innovation ecosystem.
Great. May I also add something? Actually, this is another question that I have, because I have a government background prior to moving to Cambridge, Professor. And I just want to highlight what Professor Nizam said before about compartmentalization, which is really like a big thing in Indonesian culture, to be honest. Or I don't know, is it maybe a culture, or is it maybe like just how things were being done for like years, but working in the government before, it was very, very hard for us to actually, talk to the other stakeholders, because like we have a yearly plan, we have like 5 yearly plan. Like how could we even, invite universities agenda, industry agenda into all of those plans, So like, I would like to also ask Professor Nizam about your thought about that, and also your thought about that, about like how we can actually, address that. Yeah. Maybe Professor Nizam first.
Yeah, I have a word for that. I put the acronym as SWIFT, SWIFT, SWIFT. One, we have to have a shared vision between sectors, have to have the same objective. What we are aiming at, what industry is aiming at for the next 5 years, 10 years, what academia aim at 5 years, 10 years, and make that as a shared vision, have the same goal, shared objectives. Second, win-win. It has to be beneficial to both sides. All parties see the benefit of working together, achieving something that is good for everyone. And third the initiative should come from both sides. We cannot work just one side. It needs to hand to shake, so that initiative should come from the one and the other sectors, breaking the silos, breaking the compartment that needs both sides, to make sure that the wall is broken to move from one room to the other. And F, the fast results. For strengthening the collaborations, we need to have a quick yield, quick win, to prove that working together can result in an impact, in giving an impact, results that is as expected, or in the direction of the achieving the goals. And lastly, and most importantly, trust, building trust between those sectors. So SWIFT, I think this is my reflections of the years of doing these things, and I come with that short acronym of SWIFT.
This is
We might take that the SWIFT model right into the broader REAP program, because I can't agree more. Let me just make one or two comments on what I think is a really important set of ideas there. The first is, I think that every government around the world, every economy, every country around the world faces the problem of compartmentalization, right? That the right hand and the left hand don't talk to each other. These maybe they should, but either because of history or because of politics or because of circumstance, they don't. I think that very often, and I think this is very much in line with the SWIFT model, I like that, that Professor Nizam talked about. I think that a very important place or way of thinking about that is that nothing can be true in general unless we can find places in particular where it really works. And so very often, people will be resistant to change in general. But if you can find a university and a technopark and an economic zone, for example, that could connect, and then you run this test that we just heard, the SWIFT model, and you actually make it work, that creates an example for people. And then people learn from that example. They see what trust looks like. They see what fast results look like. They see what a shared vision looks like. And then, right? And then the consequence of that is that you're able to show people how that could work in Indonesia. So I would not only just encourage the development of these kinds of initiatives and the quick wins that come from them, but also explaining them so that other groups can learn from them, and you can sort of start unraveling some of the compartmentalization that you talked about.
very simple question, actually. How important it is to think the technology transfer, so from places like MIT or developed countries to countries like Indonesia, because I know that we have compartmentalization issue to solve, but like deep tech is the product of deep tech itself. Like, is it like how important it is?
So I would say, and Professor Nizam probably has a very useful perspective on this. Deep tech, technologies that emerge over a long time from very basic science, basic research, have a disproportionate impact on driving economic growth and social progress. Let me just start there. And they take a long time, as Sabrina said. Ultimately, they end up being globally impactful. So if you look at, for example, the advances that led to mRNA vaccines, some of that research goes back almost 40 years. The most foundational ideas in biology ultimately scaled to a global solution. In the next wave of deep tech, I think that Indonesia has an opportunity to join the technological frontier by figuring out its role and working and collaborating with deep tech innovators, deep tech entrepreneurs across the globe. What are the projects, the initiatives, the activities that can be done in Indonesia that can contribute to advancing some of the hardest problems surrounding deep tech, whether or not those are around climate change, whether or not those are around AI, whether or not those are around quantum computing? Are there particular domains where the experience of Indonesian industry or Indonesia's special place in the world allows it to make its own researchers make a value-added contribution in that domain? And I know that the government in Indonesia, we were talking about this before, has recently encouraged more global scientific cooperation, more global scientific engagement by researchers within Indonesia. My sense is that's building the scientific capacity of Indonesia, and that those types of programs, particularly if they're aimed towards these deep tech areas, are likely to connect the global scientific frontier to the research base of Indonesia. And then, as we discussed before, that then needs to then itself be connected back and forth to the needs and the emergence and the growth of Indonesian industry and entrepreneurship. Hope that was helpful.
Pak Nizam, do you have any response to that?
Yes. I couldn't agree more than what Scott just mentioned. Deep tech is actually a long journey to really make a breakthrough invention. Perhaps the research goes to 30, 40 years, and nobody knows whether this basic research can eventually go into breakthrough solutions. No one imagined that quantum physics can go into quantum computing. Even now, there are still a lot of puzzles. The same with biotechnology, the same with AI. So what is at the end of the tunnel? Nobody knows. That is the deep tech that usually make people leave it or continue doing it, and finally finding a breakthrough. And that needs, global collaborations. Because more brains, more angle of looking at things, even for like countries that is still growing like Indonesia, we can collaborate with the most advanced institutions like MIT, which can spark the things or angle that might be overlooked, or things that when looked from different angle can show the real picture of what we are looking at. So I believe that the global collaborations is the way forward for global future, for sustainable future, for solving global problems, for solving climate change. All global issues need global solutions. Means needs collaborations between developed countries, developing countries, left behind countries. If we work together, solution is there. So that is what I believe, and we need to start that.
Wow, that's a very insightful conversation. I think that one of the key takeaways that I got is that this is a very long-term problem. And in order for us to achieve that, we need to do baby steps. One of the steps is this conversation where we have government sector, academia from one of the best institutions in the world. We collaborate, and I hope that this can also spark more collaboration from industries, other stakeholders, because that's one of the main ideas that I got from this conversation. The innovation in deep tech particularly wouldn't happen without the collaboration from multiple stakeholders. So I hope that we can have a very insightful takeaway from this conversation, because I did, and I hope that we can see an Indonesia with more deep tech innovation and overall a better collaboration, especially between academia and the government, industries, and everyone. So thank you so much, Professor Nizam, Professor Scott Marina, for joining us as well from Boston from this morning. And thank you so much for this very insightful conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Berakhir sudah diskusi Expert Talk kali ini, kolaborasi antara Katadata Indonesia dengan Massachusetts Institute of Technology Regional Entrepreneurship Acceleration Program, Boston, Amerika Serikat. Kita jumpa lagi di lain waktu, dan jangan lupa kalau bicara pakai data.